Welcome to the IREL podcast. Are you sick and tired of real estate gurus pitching their next free construction deal, only to find out years later they were completely wrong? Worried the next overseas conference you spend thousands to attend will only be used to sell overpriced lots in deserted developments? Join thousands of other international real estate seekers who are looking for their place in paradise without the sales pitch. Straight from your host, Taylor White.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 25 of the IREL podcast. I'm your host, Taylor White. I am really excited to share our first Canadian insider when I sit down and speak with Nick Thompson from the Thompson team in Toronto, Canada. And as always, we'll get the true story on the local real estate scene and have you coming away wanting to investigate its local property market further or cross it off your shortlist entirely and continue listening. Right now from Nick, you will learn what an extremely devoted husband and father calls Toronto home and knows it gives him the highest quality of life anywhere he has ever been. Reveals Price Waterhouse Cooper ranking Toronto third out of 27 world capitals in finance and why he believes this trend will only continue. Exposes that he is a firm believer in the fundamentals and families want great schools, minimum commute time, and strong community. Uncovers that he believes the appreciation in Toronto's real estate market will largely occur in the single-family resident niche instead of condos. Pretends he is Google Maps and Google Street View and breaks down the specific neighborhoods you should be looking in and much more. And don't forget, if you are listening to this podcast and want to grab Nick's contact details, links on buying or selling Toronto real estate, or any other show notes, head on over to irelpodcast.com/25. Grab some hot cocoa and marshmallows, take off your ski gear, and enjoy listening about one of the highest rated cities in the world for quality of living. In case you can't tell, I'm excited. Let's get Nick on the phone. Nick, what is going on, buddy? It is Taylor White. I'm excited to have you on the podcast today, straight from Toronto, Canada. So we can get a better idea of you personally. Tell us more about yourself.
Hey, Taylor, it's a real pleasure to be on your show, and thanks for inviting me. I guess, starting out, I grew up on an acreage outside of Calgary, Alberta. It was kind of the Wild West, or more of the Wild West than it is now anyway. Our house was close enough to see the Rocky Mountains in the distance, and we were surrounded by open fields, the open fields of cattle ranches. When I was growing up, we'd see deer hopping over the fields and hear wolves and coyotes at night. In the mountains, when camping, hiking, or skiing, we'd see bears and mountain goats. My closest friend lived about 5 miles away, and there weren't many opportunities to get rides from anyone's parents. The climate during the winter was bone-numbing. The temperatures of minus 30 weren't uncommon. I think this fostered a culture in Calgary that was a mix of self-reliance, goodwill, and forethought. If someone got themselves stuck in some way, there was usually a neighbor whom you could call on for help. I try to bring that same spirit of community and helpfulness with me today. Today, I think the thing that personally defines me most is my family. I have 2 great kids and a wonderful wife who I love spending time with. My kids are very active, and we share a lot of the same interests. I coach their hockey teams. We sail together on Lake Ontario. We bike through the Toronto ravines to the waterfront for lunch or just for play. We play football, baseball, love reading together. I still carry that love of nature from my childhood, and I'm really lucky that my kids like canoeing and camping in Ontario's great parks. The one we visit most often is Algonquin National Park. It is absolutely incredible and by far the best park I've ever been to. They are great. They teach me patience, humility, and appreciation for the gifts in life. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I love traveling. My sister used to live in Hong Kong, which was really lucky for me. I was able to spend several months exploring the city, the market stalls in Stanley, and some of the islands around Hong Kong. We spent our honeymoon in Bali and the Gili Islands in Indonesia, one of my 2 favorite places to visit in the world. We've sailed through the Bahamas and some of the Leeward Islands. Completing a trip through all the Leeward Islands is definitely on my bucket list. My wife's parents have a villa in Crete, which has allowed us to travel through Europe with the kids and see a lot of cultures. At the end of the day, I love traveling, but I'm always grateful to return to Toronto, even when it's minus 10.
So, Nick, I have to ask you, you said minus 10, you're in Toronto, it's February. Explain what the weather's like.
You know, you've got to be prepared for it, right? Like everyone has snow tires. The infrastructure is in place in Toronto to deal with all the snow and get rid of all the crap. You got to get out and enjoy it. I mean, if you don't enjoy it, if you don't get out there and go skiing or hiking or walking through and actually embrace the season, you get sick of it pretty quickly.
Right.
So, filling up your spare time with the activities like hockey and getting outside is really important. But, we've had a pretty brutal winter. It's been there's been some record low temperatures. So it's not all bunnies and butterflies, but, it makes you appreciate spring and summer so much more.
Bunnies and butterflies. I love that, Nick. And so we can get a better idea of you professionally. Give us your brief resume leading up to the Thompson team.
Okay, put myself through university doing manual labor on construction sites, which has given me a great understanding of the building process and all the hiccups involved, or a lot of them, involved in residential and commercial construction. I've also gone through several major renovations of my own, which helps me provide some fairly objective advice to clients when it comes to choosing projects. Superficial renovations are obviously much more manageable for the average consumer than major renovations involving structural changes. And it's fairly easy to ballpark costs and timing for renovations when you have a lot of experience going through them. After university, I co-founded a technology services company. We started by providing technology grunt work and evolved into a pretty reputable niche player providing systems management for very large networks. At the height of our company's success, around 2002, we had around 85 consultants engaged in building on the client site or prep sites. I sold my share of the company to my partners and decided to turn my attention to real estate. While I was building the technology company, my wife, Donna, had been producing commercials and TV shows. We wanted to start a family, and producing TV shows required 14-hour days, which didn't really lend itself to motherhood. So several years before I sold my company, Donna blazed the path for both of us and got her real estate license. I joined Donna after getting my real estate license, and the rest, they say, is history. We've been really lucky because we both have such complementary strengths in real estate. Having both been in the corporate world, we have a significant advantage in terms of organization and professionalism. Dunn is absolutely fantastic at marketing and advertising, and I love looking at the numbers and understanding how things are put together, whether that's deals or the structure of the house, whatever. We're both passionate about our client success, and we both continue to get referrals from people that we worked with 20 years ago. Having someone's respect and trust over that length of time is a great feeling.
Well, Nick, we are always fascinated to learn about which countries people have considered and why. Now, why don't we delve deeper into Canada as a whole, and then why you chose Toronto in particular versus other popular spots such as Vancouver and Montreal?
Taylor, I've been really lucky to have traveled to a lot of places. I really enjoy seeing different cultures and people and exploring the history, geography, and attractions in different countries. But I always feel a bit of relief and breathe a bit easier when I come home to Canada. Canada's people are just a bit more sane and a lot more humane. Geography is just a bit more beautiful, and it's a lot less polluted. It's hard to describe because each region in Canada is so different. You'd have to come and explore a little to be able to understand. With respect to Toronto in particular, that's easier to describe. Vancouver and Montreal are fantastic cities, and they have a lot going for them. Montreal is known for its restaurants and wild nightlife, while Vancouver has a tremendous natural beauty. It's a lush green year-round and lies at the foot of the mountains. Toronto isn't known for that one thing. It does everything well, and importantly, it does it all with balance.
Well, Nick, I have to ask, if we're looking at a map of Canada, can you give us a brief overview of where Toronto is as compared to everything else in Canada?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because you asked a question about winter. Toronto is pretty much the southernmost point in Canada, or close to the southernmost point in Canada. So our weather's a lot more temperate. It's It's in the eastern half of Canada, but not close to the Atlantic. It's pretty much nestled in at the southern point of the Great Lakes, right at the foot of the St. Lawrence.
And then can you give us, how close are some other cities to Toronto?
Yeah, so Toronto's right in the middle of what's called the Golden Horseshoe. There used to be separate cities like Hamilton, Burlington, Mississauga, Toronto, Markham, Scarborough, and then Ajax and Whitby. And because the population centered around Toronto, all of those areas have kind of blended into one large population belt that kind of lies around the southwest corner of Lake Ontario.
Okay. Well, Nick, I have never been to Toronto, but I'm a big believer in that I either get a place or I don't. Share with us some more reasons why Toronto speaks to you.
Well, first and most importantly, living in Toronto is fun, dynamic, and safe. It has a tremendous offering of attractions, and yet it's managed to retain a culture of respect for other people. I love the fact that Toronto will never be New York or London. While I would really enjoy visiting those places, I want to live in a city that doesn't have so much weight at either end of the socioeconomic spectrum. It's a very diverse metropolitan city with some first-rate cultural attractions. The Toronto International Film Festival, which is called TIFF, is a great experience. People flock to Toronto for Caravana, the Beach Jazz Festival. The list just goes on and on. Second, Toronto has a wealth of business opportunity. Toronto has been noted in many studies as one of the leading cities in the world, whether it's the Livability Report by the Economist Intelligence Unit, Price Waterhouse Cooper ranking Toronto third out of 27 world capitals of finance, or KPMG's 2012 comparative study finding that Toronto offers one of the world's most cost-effective business investment climates, ranking fifth in the world. Toronto is a very diverse economy. It's a major center for finance, law, health sciences, technology, engineering, and other fields. Lastly, for me, any city requires an escape. I kind of mentioned during when I described my childhood that I really like the outdoor nature. Toronto shines just as brightly in this area. Toronto sits on the edge of Lake Ontario, providing great beaches and aquatic activities like sailing and windsurfing and windboarding, etc. A series of moraines and valleys run down to the lake, which provide for a huge variety of parks and recreation areas. Every time I fly into Toronto, I'm amazed at how green the city is. The areas surrounding Toronto are covered in lakes and provincial parks. Algonquin Provincial Park is one example. It's 7,600 square kilometers. To top it all off, Muskoka and Haliburton, just north of Toronto, are the be-all and end-all of cottage getaways.
Well, Nick, we have gotten to know you both personally and professionally, reasons why you chose Canada and why Toronto speaks to you. But get ready, because now it's time for us to pick your brain on the local real estate scene and to get the juices flowing. We're going to do a quick round of what I like to call the real estate hot seat. We'll ask you 5 rapid-fire questions, and you give me an answer in 15 seconds or less each. Nick, are you ready for the Toronto hot seat?
Absolutely, Taylor. Fire away.
All right. What currency is real estate priced in?
Canadian dollars.
Is owning property as a foreigner legal?
Absolutely. There are no restrictions in terms of foreign ownership.
Can property be titled?
Each and every property I've ever dealt with has a title deed.
Can money flow in and out of Canada easily, or are there currency restrictions?
My clients have never had a problem getting money in or out of Canada.
And as listeners know, Nick, my number one question, what is your favorite local drink?
Well, that'd have to be, I think, Canadian Club and Ginger Ale. It's colloquially known as CC and Ginger.
I'm curious, what is Canadian Club?
Canadian Club is a rye. You can get it in pretty much any bar in or around the world. I haven't seen too many places that don't have CC and Ginger.
So it's a certain kind of, what kind of alcohol?
It's a rye. It's a whiskey.
It's a rye. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. A whiskey. Okay, there you go. It's a whiskey.
Yep.
I like it. Okay, Nick, you can now relax, but just a little bit, as you are off the Toronto hot seat. But it's time to zero in on the local real estate scene. Give us your brief synopsis on the Toronto real estate market over the last few years, where it is today, and then where you see it heading for the next few years.
All right. Taylor, relative to other developed cities, Toronto's real estate market has been a study in slow and steady appreciation since 1996. Toronto didn't see the double-digit appreciation or the massive drops in property prices and sales volume that other cities had during the financial crisis. Toronto's had a yearly average increase of 6.17% in price and 3.73% in volume since 2000. Toronto has avoided the wild real estate fluctuations seen in other areas due to three factors. Number one, Toronto's population is growing steadily. The immigration is at about 100,000 per year, and the Greenbelt around Toronto limits the amount of land that can be developed. This provides a steady increase in demand for housing while limiting the amount of space available to create supply. Toronto is growing vertically and avoiding the sprawl. This places a steady upward pressure on detached homes and a premium on land available for condo development. Number two, Canada, and more specifically Toronto, continues to be recognized in global publications for its political and financial stability, its thriving business environments, and its quality of life. For example, quality of life as measured by the OECD, Economist Intelligence Unit, UN Quality of Life, MasterCard, World City Leaders, etc. Number three, Toronto's thriving economy remains diverse and attracts many opportunities for stable and gainful employment. Toronto also acts as a legal and financial hub for the Canadian business community. So the Toronto real estate market remained very strong last year. The 2013 October fall sales volume had increased 21% over the sales volume from 2012. To provide a broader context, Toronto resale numbers are up by 13% over the 10-year sales average. The average price of a home in Toronto is $533,797, up by 6.5% year over year. I don't see this trend slowing down. There might be minor fluctuations when the interest rates change or whatever, but because Toronto's population and economy are growing, and as mentioned, there's a relatively new barrier to the amount of room it can grow in, single-family residences will continue to appreciate, as will land that they can be built upon.
Hey, Nick, I'm curious, as a follow-up, have you guys had a peak yet, or have you guys continued to rise since around 1990, as you said?
No, we had a mild correction in 2008. The prices dipped slightly for about a year and a half. The correction was mild, like I said, and the following appreciation, was a bit more dramatic, and basically it caught up to the trend that it had been on before. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's really amazing when you look at a map or a graph of Canada's housing market for a long period of time. It's been steadily increasing, and you guys never had a very big dip. I'm curious, when it did dip just a little bit in Toronto, did you guys have a lot of foreclosures and that kind of thing, or it didn't really happen in Toronto?
No, there weren't many foreclosures in Toronto. I think that at one point it got up to 0.5%. So 0.5% of the mortgages were at risk. Obviously that's a tiny number. And I think the reason that they only had 0.5% of the mortgages that were underwater, I think they say in America, right, is because, the banks are so stringent in terms of their due diligence and who they're loaning to. For a long time, the Canadian financial system had been considered coddled by the rest of the world. But, what that meant was the lending practices were so tight that we didn't get into the same kind of trouble that the U.S. did with mortgages.
Which is fantastic news.
Yeah, well, steady and slow is fine by me. That's, this is kind of off topic, but that's the real difference in my mind between the U.S. and its massive peaks and valleys in Canada. We tend to be a much more steady as she goes kind of place.
Absolutely. And Nick, you have a sold on Canada as a country, Toronto as a location, and then its real estate outlook within the near future. Of course, you don't have a crystal ball. I sure as heck don't. No one does. But that is why I think it's so vitally important to get on the ground insight from local real estate professionals. And yes, Nick, I just used the words local and on the ground in the same sentence to drive home a very important fact. You are not some newsletter writer who might spend a few days in Toronto and then send out emails with hot buys calling yourself an international real estate guru. You are there in the trenches on a daily basis, dealing with local buyers, sellers, agents, lawyers, and every facet of the real estate business. Nick, break this down even further for us. Pretend you are Google Maps or Google Street View. What streets, neighborhoods, or parts of the city are we talking about in Toronto?
Well, Taylor, I'm a firm believer in the fundamentals. People want to move to the areas with good schools, a minimum of commute time, and a great community. Rosedale was named the #1 area in the city by Toronto Life, based on rankings in housing, crime, transit, shopping, health and the environment, community, diversity, schools, and employment. With close proximity to subway and other transportation links, some of the best schools in the city, some of the best stores and restaurants in the city, and access to the best ravines and parks, it is a highly sought after community. On any given Saturday or Sunday in the summer, at any time during the day, you can find hundreds of children at Rosedale Park playing soccer, tennis, baseball, or carousing at the kids' park while their parents catch up and mingle. Toronto Lawn and Tennis Club, the Badminton Racket Club, Rosedale Park, and other neighborhood facilities provide walking distance access to a variety of fantastic sports facilities. Moore Park shares many community facilities with Rosedale, and the two neighborhoods are right beside each other. They're both established neighborhoods, although housing in Moore Park would be slightly less expensive. So I'm a big fan of those areas. They've got all the check boxes ticked in terms of what people are really looking for. On the less pricey side, it'd be hard to go wrong with a number of different communities in Toronto, like Hillcrest, Davisville, Leslieville, Riverdale, or the Beaches. They're all great communities with fantastic school options, parks, local amenities, and decent commute times.
Hey, Nick, I'm curious. Can you give us an idea of the population of Toronto?
Sure. Toronto proper is just above 3 million. Toronto was amalgamated about 10 or 12 years ago into the Greater Toronto Area. The GTA, which is what the Greater Toronto Area is called, is the 4th largest city in North America.
Oh, wow.
It's now bigger than Chicago.
But it sounds very connected to me by the things that you're talking about. Connected meaning it's easy to get around. You can take transportation, pretty simple.
Well, transportation is something that Toronto's currently working really hard on. We've got a bit of a loose cannonball in terms of a mayor. There's a lot of debate about what's happening with the transportation lines in Toronto right now. All of the areas that I just mentioned are kind of close to the subway or the major transit routes.
Right.
Toronto didn't, in the States, many cities had a hollowing out of the downtown core. And what happened was transportation to and from the workplaces got farther and farther away. So the commutes got longer as the livable places kind of spread out. Toronto hasn't had that at all. Downtown is a really dense mix of commercial and residential space. So the commutes from a downtown point of view are pretty short. So yes, they're very connected.
Nick, I have to ask, only because you brought it up, do you want to say anything about your mayor?
Go away.
Oh, really? Go away, huh?
No, you know what? Hey, on a fiscal side, I think he's done a great job at containing costs. And that, I think, was the real reason that Toronto voted him in as mayor. We had I had no idea that the guy has problems with, his personal life. Uh, you know, Frankly, and this is going a bit off topic, but there's a mom in Toronto somewhere who's having problems with her kids, trying to keep them safe and away from, illicit substances. And that mom's saying, hey, don't do that. And that kid's turning around saying, but the mayor of Toronto does it.
That's
And,
right.
for that reason alone, I just hope he goes and gets help.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, now that we have specific locations in mind, what types of properties do you recommend? And first, let me give you a few brief examples of what I mean. Are we talking about buying pre-construction units for capital appreciation that we later flip? Are we talking about buying completed apartments, houses, or office spaces to generate rental income? Or are we talking about buying land to either sell as is or subdivide into smaller tracts? Nick, give us a better idea of what you are talking about today.
With restrictions on the amount of space available for growth, again, Toronto's growing vertically, and the reason they put the restrictions on the amount of growth is they're trying to avoid the sprawl and the huge commute times that have come with urban sprawl. Toronto still has more high-rise buildings under construction than any other city in North America. It's been called the largest condominium market in North America. However, the number of development applications has tailed off, and the frenetic pace of condominium developments will slow down gradually over the next few years. The days of buying pre-construction and selling for a quick buck at completion are gone, and they've been gone for a couple of years. And I don't think that that those days will be back again for a couple of years. Because Toronto will grow higher and not wider, the appreciation in Toronto's real estate market will largely occur in single-family residence. There's no land left to develop single-family residences in Toronto proper. So the money to be made will be renovations of existing stock. Taking a rundown house, renovating it for today's standards of usability, function, and design, and either holding it for personal use or selling it.
Okay, Nick, now I'm going to hit you up with a two-part question that I know everyone wants to know, and you have to give us a general range so we have some price points in mind. Here they are. Part one, what would be the price range of what we are talking about? A starting price point at the low end to a final price point at the high end. And Nick, just to clarify, I'm talking about total purchase price.
Okay. At the lower end, you can find a house in Danforth for $400,000. And again, keep in mind, we're talking about Toronto proper, not the outlying suburbs.
Right.
Investing $150,000, you'd be looking to sell at around $700,000. At the upper end, you could buy a great home that needs updating on a street called Chestnut Park in Rosedale for $3.1 million. With $1 million in renovations, you'd be looking for a sale north of $5.1 million.
Nick, I'm going to transition to a part two. I know it's very tough, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What would be the cost per meter, just as a general guideline?
Okay, so for the purchase price, you're starting in the $1,500 per meter area and working up to $11,000, $12,000 per meter and beyond. The renovations, which obviously vary in cost depending on your proposed purchaser, will range from $570 per square meter and up.
And then, Nick, you were talking about Toronto proper quite a bit. Can you explain how big that is?
So again, Toronto proper has a population of 3 million. Toronto proper is probably, say, 30 kilometers across and 30 kilometers east to west and about 20 kilometers north to south.
And is that downtown Toronto?
It's the area that before amalgamation, it's the area that used to be called Toronto. The outlying subdivisions had different names, again, like Mississauga, like Scarborough, Thornhill, etc. So it's the area that used to be known as Toronto.
Okay, perfect. Got it. Nick, this is a question I like to call, what would grandma do? My grandma calls you up, Nick, says she has X amount of dollars to spend. You can't let my grandma down. Share with us 3 specific examples you would show her and explain why these make sense.
Well, Taylor, as always, it depends on what grandma's requirements are. In a city this large, there are lots of choices. As mentioned before, Toronto is running out of developable land. There is a green belt around Toronto that has stopped the sprawl of the city. My answer will therefore take advantage of the lack of single-family residence space, giving grandma less risk and more reward. Goodness knows, I don't want to be the one that gives grandma advice lightly. Little Italy is a well-established and very trendy area within Toronto. There are lots of cafes, restaurants, and entertainment options within walking distance. Bordering on Little Italy, which is relatively pricey, is an up-and-coming area called Beaconsfield. With great access to schools, transportation, parks, and local amenities, this is the type of area where the local store owners know you by name. For $520,000, you can get a semi-detached with a good structure. If you invest $100,000 in upgrades, you'll be able to sell for over $750,000. Moving farther north, one finds a community called Humewood. About 40 years ago, the government sequestered large tracts of land in Humewood for an extension to a major highway. The government was stopped by local groups from building the highway, and Humewood lay dormant for many years as a rental community that was run by the government. Obviously, prices were fairly low when the government sold off its land. Humewood, however, has excellent parks and great transportation. It also has bigger lots and homes than the average. For $636,000, you can buy a solid brick 3-bedroom home. With an investment of $200,000, you'll end up with a property that's worth well over $1 million. I spoke to you briefly before about Rosedale. It was voted the #1 community in Toronto. Last opportunity I'll highlight is on one of the most prestigious streets in Rosedale. For $3,100,000, you can get a great home that is in need of modernization. Investing $1 million in renovations, you'd end up with a house that's worth well over $5 million. That's a lot of profit. And the best part about it is that it's on one of the most coveted addresses. During the financial crisis of 2008, there were still a lot of people looking to buy on this street.
Hey, Nick, I'm curious, at the Thompson team, do you guys focus on dealing with buyers, sellers, or both sides?
We deal with both sides. What's important to us is less about whether they're a buyer and seller and more about the service and the execution that we can provide the people. We typically don't we normally wouldn't deal with rentals, but I mean, for past clients and for friends, we'll deal with specific types of things like that. We deal with both buyers and sellers.
And then do you focus specifically on a certain area?
We mostly focus on single-family residents in Midtown Toronto. Midtown Toronto is known as having larger lots, streets where kids can play, good commute times because it's still pretty close to downtown. We also focus on condos, which are kind of Midtown and downtown as well.
And Nick, we are laser focused on specific areas of Toronto. We know our starting price point. We have an idea of cost per meter. We have 3 specific examples which are good enough even for grandma. Now, I have to ask you an obvious question. How are we going to buy? Do we need to come in with all cash, whether that's from our checking account, home equity line of credit, or retirement funds? Or can we come in with a certain percentage down and get local financing from a bank or credit union?
Taylor, there are some programs for first-time home buyers that allow for the use of registered retirement funds for the purchase of a first-time home. However, I'd imagine that grandma's probably past that stage. I've never seen anyone pull out a duffel bag of cash either. That wouldn't go over very well. For the rest of us, having a down payment and financing the rest with a bank mortgage is the way to go. Hopefully, the purchaser is taking care of all their mortgaging requirements with the bank prior to submitting an offer. Canadian banks have been known to be very cautious in lending money, which is one of the reasons that Canada's escaped the property meltdown that hit many other countries, as we were talking about before. However, even if the purchaser gets pre-approval for a certain mortgage amount, the bank's still going to need to appraise the property prior to providing a mortgage. As such, an offer conditional upon bank appraisal is the way to go. Canada has a mortgage insurance provider called CMHC. They'll that will provide mortgage insurance for qualified individuals and properties if the purchase is under $1 million. CMHC insurance is required for any mortgages that are highly leveraged. That is, any mortgages that have less than a 20% down payment. Even if you qualify for CMHC, the minimum down payment is 5%. So once a purchaser has all these details worked out with the bank and they've made an offer on a property that has been accepted, a bank draft deposit delivered within 48 hours of an accepted offer is the norm. Obviously, the larger the deposit, the more comfortable a seller will be with your offer. A 5% deposit is usually the minimum acceptable. A larger deposit makes your offer look more appealing.
Nick, I'm curious, can foreign buyers get local mortgages?
Yeah, foreign buyers can get local mortgages. The banks will be a lot more cautious, but foreign buyers are certainly able to deal with Canadian financial institutions. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Canadian financial institutions welcome the opportunity of servicing foreign clients.
Fantastic. They would just obviously probably have to put down more of a down payment.
A lot of foreign buyers will come in and put an offer on a home, and they can either get financing in their country of origin, or the Canadian banks will typically require a larger deposit and down payment.
Well, Nick, I have one more question, and then I'll let you get out of here. Anyone who has ever owned real estate can tell you, you need to have a money exit strategy in place even before you buy. It's something what I like to call, where's the cheddar? You are buying the property to do what with it to make some money. So, Nick, where's my cheddar?
That's a great question, Taylor. Everyone loves cheddar.
That's right.
Like in everything in life, the details are absolutely critical. The cheddar lies in your choice of location, first and foremost, the amount that you purchase the property for, the value you put into the property, and last but definitely not least, finding the buyer who wants to pay the most for your completed masterpiece. Given that we're going to renovate an existing structure or pull down an old structure and build a completely new one, you've got to find a location that is sought after. Most of Toronto is sought after, but you'll get a lot more interest in neighborhoods that are known for their schools, community attractions, commute, etc. Different price points will come with different check boxes of requirements that purchasers will want. Knowing the difference between a good location and a great one is really important. I'll put a plug in here for what Donna and I do. We've done the search for ourselves and for many of our clients, and we're told that we have delivered absolutely fantastic service and results. Fantastic means not only end results, the cheddar, but honest, diligent, and professional service all the way from research to acquisition and finally to the end sale. Our properties have been featured in magazines around the world, from editorial spreads in New York Times to Europe's Object magazine and Asia Tatler. Like everywhere else, Torontonians compete in an international marketplace to earn their money. They're willing to pay someone else to create their dream home in their dream community. So at the end of the day, Taylor, the cheddar is all about execution. There are people coming to Toronto from all corners of the world, capturing the local market and, just as importantly, the international market from a buyer's perspective will yield great returns for a well-thought-out investment.
Nick, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to share with us about Toronto real estate. We have heard about your journey, why you chose Canada, exact areas of Toronto to focus on, price points to look out for, specific examples good enough even for grandma, a money strategy to purchase, and then what we might do with it after the fact to make some cheddar. Unfortunately, it's time to say goodbye. But before we do, share with us easy ways to get a hold of you, any parting advice you might want to share, and then let's say goodbye.
All right, Taylor. In summing up, we're all about personalized service and more specifically results. So please call me anytime. We have a lot of information available on our website for background research. That's at www.thompsonteam.ca. You can even perform web searches for all the Toronto listings or get inside information on properties that are for sale but don't necessarily have for sale signs in front of them. Email works just as well. Choose the medium you want, and we'll be happy to help you with your real estate needs. Our website is www.thompsonteam.ca. That's www.thompsonteam.ca. Our email is info@thompsonteam.ca, or my direct mail is nick@thompsonteam.ca, and my cell phone is 416-294-5052.
Absolutely fantastic, Nick. I have really enjoyed this conversation straight from Toronto, Canada to our earbuds, and I hope we can catch up again in 3 to 6 months.
Thank you so much, Taylor. It's been a pleasure. And once again, thank you for having me on your show.
I want to thank Nick once again for his extremely knowledgeable on-the-ground insights from this amazing city in the Great White North. Being our first Canadian insider, Nick and I only scratched the surface on what Toronto has to offer, and I can't wait to get him back on the show again soon with more specific Toronto real estate investments he believes you need to hear about right now. If you're listening to this podcast and want to grab Nick's contact details, links on buying or selling Toronto real estate, or any other show notes, head on over to irelpodcast.com/25. Nick got you all excited about this amazing Canadian city, and you want to see what kind of real estate deals there are. You want to be in the comfort of your home or office and want to get all of these listings as placed by owners, agents, and developers sent directly to your email inbox completely free. Relax. We have you covered. Head on over to irelpodcast.com/25 to get signed up.
You have been listening to the IREL Podcast with Taylor White. Be sure to hit up irelpodcast.com for more. That's irelpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.